Been more than 3 weeks since she was last seen at LAX. Now, her mother and sister releasing a statement on Facebook last night claiming investigators are reporting false information about the case and that there's been a lack of communication between the family and those investigators. Now, let's show you a little more of that statement. Like I mentioned, this was posted on Facebook. The sister, Sydney Kobayashi, goes on to say, quote, "The lack of communication surrounding some important details has left us feeling excluded from potentially crucial developments. However, we do remain optimistic that the Los Angeles Police Department is doing everything in their power to assist us in locating Hannah."
Is Hannah still alive, or was she a victim of foul play? According to the Daily Mail, Los Angeles police have apparently determined that missing Hawaii woman Hannah Kobayashi intentionally missed her flight to New York City, though her family says she would never do that. But what if it's true?
I got nightmares in my head, I fear thoughts build up until I can't breathe. My mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. In this analysis, I want to weigh the foul play case against an alternative theory and see where that thought experiment takes us. In order to do that, we need to open our minds, adopt the scout mindset, which means be curious, and keep our minds open while we ponder various scenarios. Do you think you can do that with me? But before we get to that, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. Bear in mind, I'll be doing a read-through of Detective Steve Thomas's letter following this video, so look out for that. If you're finding this analysis worthwhile, intelligent, meaningful, sensible rather than sensational, please like, share, leave a comment. You can also hit the thanks button, and let's get started. Now, do you remember in the Jay Slater case, that case dealt with a British kid who went missing in Tenerife? His family also said he would never have wandered off a cliff, but the authorities knew better, and that is actually where they found him ultimately. In this case, I think we need to at least explore the possibility that Hannah wandered off of her own volition, and I do think it does make sense to kind of give the police a little credit for probably knowing or having a handle on the information probably better than many of us do. Not necessarily, but possibly. According to the Daily Mail, quote, Hannah had earlier sent a friend a text message saying that she had a spiritual awakening and was later seen in the company of a mystery man on November 11. The question is whether the spiritual awakening text is authentic. Do you think it was? Did Hannah send it or someone else? Did Hannah go through some kind of spiritual awakening within moments of arriving in Los Angeles? Now, let's examine this question of intent through 4 different dimensions. Number 1, the Hannah is still alive theory. Now, on the surface, there are at least 3 reasons why Hannah may have had a change of heart, maybe 4, when she arrived at LAX. The first is she was traveling on the same flight as her ex-boyfriend, and clearly there is no love lost between them, or it certainly seems that way, because he hasn't added his voice to the appeal to find her. Think about it, he's one of the last people who knew her to see her. Now, maybe he knows something we don't, but it could be as simple as Hannah not wanting to keep bumping into him, which can happen on long-haul flights traveling, for travelers with a common destination. Now, the second point is that if she did lose money in some way, if she was scammed, for example, this may have affected her budget. Remember, Hannah didn't have some regular day job to go back to. It could also be that Hannah paid money into some sort of, like some people make payments to religious organizations. Maybe Hannah did something like that. Thirdly, the gig she was going to New York, remember, that wasn't a paid job. It wasn't as though she was going to lose money if she didn't go there. And so, it was more a trade, her photos in exchange for a ticket. Let's go to CNN just to get some certainty around those details. Although Hannah was to visit another aunt in upstate New York, she also intended to take pictures at a DJ's mid-November show in Brooklyn. That's according to her family. She had sent a message to the DJ offering to give him photos for the show, that's for free, in exchange for a pass to the event. The artist agreed and also offered free merchandise, one of the musician's managers told CNN. Now, I've been in that position myself where you do work essentially for free or for accommodation or something, but think about what's going on. Hannah is paying a huge amount of money just to get to New York. The whole thing is a loss-making enterprise. So if Hannah lost money on the way to a non-paying job, this alone could have scuppered her plans. There's also another possibility worth mentioning, which is a tactic employed by some travelers to save money. And it's called skip lagging. Have you ever heard it? Have you ever heard that term? The New York Times defines skip lagging as buying a ticket for a connecting flight with a layover in the city that's the real destination for the traveler. Airlines hate it, and technically it's not illegal. But isn't it possible that LA was Hannah's real destination after all? I mean, she immediately headed to another event there and a bookstore, which seems to suggest she was no longer invested in the New York part of the plan anyway. That brings us to number 2. Epiphanies while traveling are quite common. Now, epiphanies are very common when people travel. If you've traveled, you've probably had them yourself. I recently traveled with 2 companions. It was actually just a few weeks ago, and it seems like all 3 of us had epiphanies, pretty big ones too. So anything could have changed Hannah's mind, from a potential gripe or resentment against perhaps her ex, someone Hannah was essentially traveling with in this case. And we know that there was actually an attempt was made to get refunds for this trip, which already shows that there was a feeling of not wanting the original ticket. And I think that is something that is definitely worth thinking about. It's also possible that Hannah found love. Perhaps it's someone she was already corresponding with. Perhaps it's someone she met through complete happenstance, kind of serendipitously. And, she's not a bad-looking girl, so it's possible. Who knows? Perhaps she even found friendship on the way. But it could also simply be a change, deciding on a change of plans and then deciding to change her itinerary. And if you travel, all of these things happen all the time. Now, Kobayashi's family has repeatedly said she did not seem to be acting like her normal self. Especially her sister Sydney has suggested that Hannah's text messages, in her words, feel like someone is controlling her. Now, it could be that someone was controlling her. Perhaps she felt emotional towards someone, or that that someone who was controlling her could have been her ex-boyfriend, in the sense of, I don't really want to be hanging out with you. I don't want to be in the same plane as you, right? Or it could be that something was controlling her, perhaps her lost money, or perhaps some other compulsion, perhaps to a new spirituality. Perhaps that was overtaking her. It could even have been just a change of heart, emotions that got her to change her mind. And the LAPD seemed to think that she did have a change of heart, that she did change her mind. According to one article, a Board of Police Commissioners meeting on November 26th, LAPD Chief Jim McDonnell said that the investigation determined that Hannah's misconnection was intentional. Now, one clear indicator that Hannah seemed to have a change of heart is that she collected her bags from the airport. And have a look at this post from Jennifer Coffindaffer, she's ex-FBI, on X, where she said, "Why did Hannah have the airline send her luggage back to her? To change and have her things make sense. It seems she changed her plans to go to New York at some point before the 11th of November, but when and why?" She also Coffindaffer talks about Hannah wearing the same clothing for 3 days. Suggests that she was kind of almost stewing on, almost vacillating on, should I do this, should I make this change or not? And that brings us to number 3, a creative type of personality. Now, in order to figure out the why here, I think we need to figure out the who. According to the Daily Mail, Sydney, that's Hannah's sister, also hit out at the report to Hawaii News Now, saying the police chief kind of seems to state that it was as if Hannah went out and about to do her own thing, which she was worried might discourage people from searching for her. But is that so unreasonable? In the Jay Slater case, family thought it was weird that Jay would catch a ride with complete strangers. But within the context of partying all night and getting high, it's not really strange at all. It's risky, certainly, but it's something that youngsters do all the time. So the question here is, did Hannah act on impulse in a similar way to what Jay Slater did? And this is where it gets quite interesting. Some people have described her as very creative, as an artistic soul, and one of them was her friend Alyssa Peterson, said that this creative streak, in her words, is just embedded in her. And what is characteristic of creative people? They're often impulsive. They don't think in a similar way to many other people. Hannah also enjoyed dancing at house music shows and hoped to be a DJ one day with a DJ named Lil Trees, according to her friend Alyssa. She had just bought her own turntables, according to her aunt. That alone might be quite an interesting insight into Hannah's true intentions. But I mean, overall, one is getting a sense of Hannah as a free spirit, and free-spirited people don't act according to conventions. I mean, their behavior is by definition often unconventional. And so what this also shows, this buying of her own turntables, it seems to show that Hannah seemed to be pivoting from photography to DJing. You know, if she was in a pivoting phase of her life, and she did seem to be, then theoretically she could pivot any when and anywhere. Isn't that what happened? Now, according to another article in an Instagram post from 2018, is some time ago, 6 years ago, she wrote about wanting to bring her future children to a spot in Hawaii. And these were her words. Hannah wrote, "I can't wait for the day I can take my children here so we can rough it out in the middle of nowhere to reconnect with nature and ourselves. And here you kind of get another sense of the type of person Hannah is. So did Hannah meet someone? And is she roughing it out somewhere in the middle of nowhere? I guess it's possible, but I'm inclined to say no. And that brings us to the fourth point, why foul play is likely, in my opinion. There are 5 basic reasons foul play are likely, at least based on the information we have at present. Number 1, her phone has died and remained silent. Now bear in mind the last texts didn't sound like her, according to those who know her. And staged texts and social media have a sordid history in true crime, as we've seen in the murder of Kelsey Berrett. That's the Patrick Frazee case. I've written a book about that. Also the Jodi Arias case. I've written a couple of books about that. And then arguably also Suzanne Morphew. Can you name a couple of other cases involving staged texts where it turns out the person is no longer alive? When a phone suddenly goes silent, it often means the owner has as well. Number 2, Hannah's Instagram has stalled as well, not just her phone, but her social media. 3 weeks is a very long time to go completely radio silent. Not only completely off your phone, but social media as well. When last were you completely offline for a full day? How about going offline for a full week? How about 3 weeks or even more? And then also, number 3, her father's death. Even if Hannah did have some sort of epiphany and perhaps wanted to rough it in the wilderness, it's difficult to imagine that she would have allowed her father to go through what he went through for nothing. It's also unlikely that she simply wouldn't know about her father Ryan's death. I mean, one of the last things she did was charge her phone, as many of us do. And she did that, I think, because she wanted to stay online. She wanted to stay connected. Number 4, Hannah said she was scared. I think what makes this point so pertinent is it doesn't happen in the middle of nowhere. It happens right at the end of her story. So her saying that she's scared, think about some of the last statements Jay Slater made, where he said that he was thirsty and he'd cut himself on a cactus and he was lost. Well, that turned out to be very portentous as well. And I think this, in a similar way, is very portentous and in some ways ominous. Number 5, Hannah was seen in the company of an unknown individual. So, if you're saying that Hannah simply had a change of heart and then left, well, it seems like someone had something to do with that. And is this individual a benign person or not? And we asked a similar question with Jay Slater, that the last people he saw, were they sort of, what kind of characters were they? And although it was quite interesting what we found out, that speculation didn't really lead anywhere. And so the question is it going to lead anywhere in this case? I've got a feeling that might be a bit different in this particular instance. Because think about it, she was potentially already a victim of a crime when she met this unknown individual. And so wasn't this unknown individual opportunistically taking advantage of her? And so for these reasons and more, I remain convinced that Hannah is either in danger or, I'm afraid, she's no longer with us. What do you think? Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.